Hey guys, it's Yogi Doug Johnson back with another Yin Yoga class for you. This one is an hour long, and this is my pendulum sequence. And I created this sequence to articulate the femur bone, the hip joint, through all 6 of its articulations. So in today's class, we're going to do the dragon pose, the half butterfly, kickstand, shoelace, sleeping swan, and the half saddle pose. And if you enjoy this kind of content, if you enjoy the class, please give me a thumbs up. If you like spiritual teachings, yoga classes, kirtan, yoga nidras, things of that nature, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you'll always be notified when I have a new video. All right, if there are any questions that come up during the class, if something is unclear, if you have trouble, be sure to leave me a comment below and I'll be happy to help you out. All right, everyone, thanks so much. Namaste. So we'll begin with what we like to call marauding bear, which is a tabletop position. And just moving the torso, the hips, the shoulder, the neck, moving that around freely. And just the idea of getting some blood flow in there. I think you've all heard me mention in the past that just simple movements even simple movements can be very good for us. So this is nothing fancy. It's something pretty much everybody can do, just moving your torso around. Not only does this help you warm up, but it also helps you sort of check in on your body. So, if you move a certain way and, ooh, there's a sharp pain there, that's probably telling you something. And if the next time you do that, there's no pain, then it was just a passing, some passing pain. That happens. But if every time you do that one movement, there's a sharp pain or even a dull pain, that's really trying to tell you something, and you might want to start to investigate. Why is that? Do you know why? Is it because of a certain workout you're doing? Is it how you're sitting? Something that you're doing or not doing? Then from there, when you're ready, you tuck your toes, lift your hips, and just do a little bit of the down dog here, walking your dog out. Again, think about moving all those different parts of your body, so your feet, your legs, getting them to move a bit, to stretch a bit. Okay, and then from there, we're going to come into what we call a dragon pose. So bringing the left foot forward, the right knee to the ground. And then here's the key part, raising the torso up and back as much as possible. Okay, so what I'd like you to think about you're doing here is your hips are forward and down, your torso is up and back. Okay, that's really the 2 actions. So hips forward, torso up and back, and that's going to create a stretch right here at the front of the right hip. So those are the hip flexors, and that's the area that we're targeting in this posture. Okay. Now, for a lot of people, that is a sensitive area. It's a kind of a tender area. I theorize, I can't prove this, I don't know this for a fact, but I theorize that that's very tender because those muscles are neglected, if you will. They're kind of abused in our modern lifestyle. They don't get used properly or enough or in the right way. And so I suspect that this is particularly difficult for many people because of that. If these muscles are healthier, I suspect that this is easier for you. So for instance, people who do yoga a lot, very often this isn't that big a deal. I mean, I don't think it's anyone's favorite position necessarily, but it's not a huge deal. But for people who are newer to yoga or maybe only do certain kinds of yoga, they don't do this kind of stretch very often, then they might be like, oh my God, this is the worst pose, this is so difficult. They're coming in and out of it, they're coming down, they're rocking their hips back. Again, just because that sensation is so intense. So the question we want to ask ourselves is, why is it so intense? Now you might say, well, because this is a weird position, but it's not really. This is just called extension or hyperextension of our femur bone, right? We're not in some kind of contortion. We wouldn't pay to see a ballerina or somebody at Cirque du Soleil do this pose. It's not, you know, outlandish or crazy or, oh my God, well, look at what they're doing. It's not even a split, right? It's not even a full split. Even the splits, we might be somewhat impressed. Oh, okay, wow, look, you know, he's doing a full split. So we have to keep it in perspective. Yes, this might be uncomfortable or difficult for us. However, it really shouldn't be. This should be just sort of a natural, normal movement for us. Again, maybe it's never our favorite. Maybe we're never like, oh, I love that dragon pose. That feels great. But again, the more painful something like this is, the more we have to stop and say, why is that? Okay, let's switch sides. So either a down dog or a tabletop are a good transition. So right leg forward. And then again, the two main actions are hips forward and down, torso up and back. I do want to speak about the props for a moment. Okay, if you have them at home. I know not everybody does. But the arms can pretty much be positioned in any way that is helpful for you to do the pose. So again, I don't really want you here or here because you are not stretching your hip flexors very much in those positions. If that's all you can do, that's fine. But if possible, we want to raise that torso up and back. So we use the hands maybe to push back, or maybe we even place our hands on the hips, right? Something like that. Or again, some people like to use the blocks like that. Another prop that you might use is placing something under your left knee on this side. So like a blanket. If you're like on a hardwood floor or your mat just does not have much cushion to it, something like that might be a good idea. As always, remember, we want to feel it. So we want to feel it here at the front of the left hip. Again, hip flexors, that's the area that we're targeting. Now, I'm talking about the hip flexors, but actually, in today's class, we want to think of this as hyperextension, which is, again, the femur, which is this thigh bone, is coming behind me. All right, so that's why, again, the more my torso is raised up, the more evident that is. This leg is coming behind me. All right, and that's a movement. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's a movement that modern people in general lose. We're losing that ability to bring our leg behind us. One PT I know, physical therapist I know, and someone who works with bodies and training a lot, described the modern gait. She described it as basically like a controlled fall. So think about this next time you're walking, and if you observe other people, you might see this in action, where people sort of lean forward and then they step forward to keep themselves from falling, essentially. So it's sort of like a lean forward, and then you're like grabbing the ground in front of you and pulling it toward you. Whereas I understand that indigenous peoples and our ancestors walked more upright, and then they would take a step and then push their leg behind them. So think about that next time you're walking. Are you pushing your leg behind you, or are you simply grabbing in front and pulling up to your body, and then again falling forward, grabbing and then pulling the ground toward you? All right, let's go ahead and come on out of this, and we'll rest on our back for a moment. In this style of yoga, we just call that a rebound. And the best thing you can do is just be still for a few moments. Relax. Okay, let's bring our legs in. We'll give them a little squeeze. Make a few circles with your knees. You can rock back and forth or side to side. And then to come up, we'll use the hinge, which helps to stabilize the hips and spine. So hands under the hips, we extend those legs up, lift the head and neck, take a deep breath, exhale, lower the legs toward the ground. Just before they touch, pause, inhale, legs up, and exhale up to seated. Okay, so moving on, we're going to do the opposite movement. That's how this sequence got its name, pendulum. So pendulum, right, swings back and forth. So any movement that we do with our hip, there's an equal and opposite movement. That's the way to think about today's class. So what is the equal and opposite movement of bringing my leg behind me? It's bringing my leg out in front of me. And this is called flexion. So right leg is straight, left foot comes to the inside of the thigh. And then I just let my upper body relax. And I'm looking for a stretch here in the back of the right thigh. Now again, I can use props if I have them. If not, you should be fine. As long as you don't feel that you're endangering your body doing this, you might be a little uncomfortable, but you're not unsafe, which is the most important thing. So let's take a look at the props here. Again, the blocks can be used, so I can use them to support my arms. I could put a block under my forehead, right? I have different heights that I can use. I can place a block under my knee, my left knee. I can support this leg as much as I feel necessary to make it comfortable. And then to go a little further, I could try sitting on a block or a folded blanket, and that pushes me into the pose more aggressively. So definitely more intense. I can feel it. You could also lay your torso on a bolster, but whenever I mention that, I like to mention restorative yoga. Restorative yoga is a wonderful type of yoga. And the idea is that when the body is supported, it relaxes naturally. Restorative yoga is a very meditative style of yoga. But it's not Yin Yoga. And Yin Yoga is not restorative yoga. So, if we use too much support, we stop feeling the stretch. And when we stop feeling the stretch, we're probably not getting the benefit that we are expecting from Yin Yoga, which is it's going to stretch the muscles, it's going to strengthen the connective tissue and joints, it's going to rebalance the energy lines in the body. And so when we are no longer feeling the stretch, we may no longer be getting those benefits. Restorative is very relaxing and it has its own benefits, but they're different than Yin. So we want to be careful not to end up doing a different style of yoga when we're intending to do Yin Yoga. And I'm not going to say that there is a sharp, distinct line between the two. They very well can bleed sort of into one another. But I like to make this point, and I like to try and make it as clear as I can so that students who are looking for the benefits of a Yin practice know how to do it. And then if you're looking for the benefits of restorative yoga, go do a restorative yoga class. It's a wonderful style of yoga. Again, if I had my way, I would teach many, many, many different styles of yoga, including restorative yoga. if I could have students who would actually sort of follow my direction and do everything that I told them to do, we would be doing probably 3 to 5 different styles of yoga on a regular basis. Let's switch sides. Okay, so this is half butterfly. So the fact of the matter is most of us don't have time to do like 5 different yoga classes every week. We're very often lucky if we can do one. And I find that for many people, 2 to 3 is about what they can fit in. It's not to say there aren't people who do yoga every single day. There are. But even then, they might find that they gravitate toward, a couple different styles. They don't necessarily go do every different kind of style of yoga. But in my mind, each of these have a unique, they have something to teach us, for lack of a better way of putting it. Each of these have something to show us and to teach us. So it's wonderful to practice all these different styles if we do have the time or inclination. Sometimes I take students on retreat, and on retreat we can explore more different styles and just the couple that we might be used to doing. And there again is a lot of learning that can happen by practicing different styles. So if you ever get a chance to, after the pandemic's over, or when you feel ready to go back into the yoga studios and practice restorative yoga, hatha yoga or classical yoga, power yoga, yin yoga, all these different styles, I recommend it. They definitely each have something to bring to the table, something we can learn. One thing I'll encourage you to be aware of is the difference between a class that is different on a weekly basis and a class that is always the same. So I've noticed that classes that are the same or almost the same every week can have a very strong appeal to people, especially what I'll go ahead and call a type A personality. They're drawn to that approach because they can kind of track their progress. And for them, the progress is a very big deal. They like to see that they're getting better at something. So if I teach the same 26 postures in the same order, in the same way every week, for someone who's looking for that sort of validation and that affirmation that they're making progress in their yoga, this can be very, very appealing. And again, they can sort of obsess about each posture. You're not going to throw them a wrench. They're not going to be, what pose is this? They're not going to feel confused. They feel like, they can study and get better and feel like they're getting a better grade, so to speak. Let's go ahead and come on up. We'll make our way onto our back. And just relax for a few moments. So I mention this because what I've seen in some of the studios I work at is some people end up coming to only these classes that are sequenced like that. They're the same every single week, same postures, same order. And they might go do something like that many times a week. Now, one, I think that this verges on addiction, a kind of addiction. And then secondly, it's not that good for your body to do the same things over and over and over and over again. It's much better for you to bring in some variety. It's also not as good for your brain. You want your brain to be stimulated. If you're confused in a class, that's a good thing. That means that your brain is having to process new information. If you're like, what? How are they doing that pose? I'm not sure what's going on. That you might feel stupid or embarrassed, but that's actually something that you want to be happening in your practice. Okay, let's bring our legs in, and then we'll hinge up. From here we move into tabletop, and we'll turn to face the long side of the mat. Once there, take the right leg straight out to the right and bring your left knee away from the right leg. This is called kickstand. It's a type of half frog pose. The stretch is for the inside of the groin. Once again, you could rest your head on something. You could put your blanket under your forearms. You could stay up on your hands if you prefer, but many people come down here. You could even rest your torso on a bolster as long as you still feel the stretch and you feel safe. So I was listening to a lecture about brain-based cognitive therapies for improving performance and basically improving your life. And the gentleman giving the lecture was talking about aging and the aging brain. So starting in your 20s and 30s, your brain starts to lose mass, and it starts to lose, it becomes less sharp, essentially. Certain processes begin to slow down. Now, other things in your brain actually can improve with age, but many processes start to slow down, and the brain basically begins to shrink. And so he was saying, how can we prevent or slow this from happening? And what he said was something that I already knew, but it's always nice to hear these things reinforced by experts like this. And so he was saying, every month learn something new that you've never done before. So if you don't draw, or say figure drawing, then go to a figure drawing class and learn to figure draw. Now, you don't have to keep figure drawing. That's the thing. Once it becomes familiar, a lot of the benefit wears off. If you've never done a certain kind of exercise, go do that exercise. So he said, put on your calendar once a month, on the first day of the month or whatever, go do something that you've never done before, and that will help to keep your brain fresh and young. So again, what I've seen in yoga classes is people very often can be resistant to new things, new postures, new ways of doing things, because again, they like the familiar. It's understandable. We all like it. We don't like to feel stupid. We don't like to feel like we're lost. But in terms of your body and your brain, it's much better if on a regular basis you are challenged, you are confused, you are a little, how do we do that? I'm not sure. That's a good thing. That's what we want to happen for us. Okay, so switching sides, take your time. Stretching the inside of the groin. So the same is also true of our body. David Sinclair, who's a professor at a well-known university, Ivy League university, he's studying reversing aging, basically. How do we stop aging and even reverse it? And in an interview that I saw him give, where the interviewer was just sort of like, okay, what's the baseline? What's the bottom line? What's the takeaway? If you don't have access to expensive, genetic therapies and things like that, which are things that they are working on. They're working on drug therapies and genetic therapies that maybe can help reverse the aging process. But the interviewer was like, okay, what can the viewer at home do now, after watching this interview? What can they do to help reverse or stop their aging process? And the main takeaway that I took from what he said was basically you have to challenge your body. And I remember when I started teaching, it was over 10 years ago, started teaching yoga postures. I had taught meditation prior to that. But when I started teaching yoga postures, people in their 40s and 50s and 60s would come up to me after class and say, I love your teaching, but your class is difficult. And can you come up with stuff that's easier for people my age? And that attitude is exactly the wrong attitude that we want to have as we begin to age. If something that I used to do starts to become more difficult or challenging for me, in many ways I want to start doing that thing more. Or I want to find ways of challenging my body that will make it easier for me to do those things. This is not what our culture generally encourages us to do. Generally, our culture says, go to a hospital, go buy some product, use technology or science or something to make your life easier. Or stop doing that thing. You don't need to do it, right? Our ancestors would have to walk for miles just to survive. They would have to go hunting and gathering just to survive. There was not a choice of saying, well, I'm not going to walk anymore because my hip hurts, so I'm going to use a scooter to get everywhere. I'm going to drive everywhere instead of walking. It just was not an option. And as a result, they stayed healthier longer. All right, let's go ahead and come on out of that. Again, making our way back onto our back. Let's relax for a moment. So this can be somewhat counterintuitive. As we begin to age, we get tired more easily, sore and stiff more easily. Our recovery takes longer. It's more and more unpleasant to use your body, and same with your brain. You might feel like, when I was 13, I could learn this stuff so easily, and now it's hard for me to learn this stuff. It takes so much longer, it's so much slower, I don't want to do it. But if you're understanding this basic principle about human health, wellness, and ultimately health and wellness lead to happiness, I don't think you can really separate the two. So if you understand this, we actually, as our bodies begin to sort of creak and complain and stop wanting to do things, we actually have to sort of ramp up, if anything. We actually want to move in the other direction to a degree, okay? So I always need to say that, because some people, they take stuff way out of context and to an extreme, and then they go start becoming an ultra marathoner or something, and they injure themselves, and they say, well, Doug told me to challenge myself or whatever. But within reason, okay? Yes, your aging body is less resilient than when it was in its 20s and 30s, so you may not be able to do what you could do in your 20s and 30s. That's okay, but you still want to challenge it. Okay, let's bring the legs in, give them a little squeeze. And then we again hinge up. All right, this next one can be challenging in some ways to some people. So legs straight, we bring the right leg over the left like so, and then if possible, left foot back towards the right hip. Again, I can use props to support my upper body. I can sit on something, and if this is hard to do, it can be done like this as well. So on your back, you're sort of pulling the legs in opposite directions, like, you know, right leg to the left and left leg to the right. And then I'm also hugging them in, and I feel it out here. So that's where we want to feel it, the outside of that hip. Okay? And this is called shoelace pose. So, challenge is good for us, not just physically, but mentally as well. And I would argue emotionally as well. I'm maybe not as versed on that. Usually my main focus when doing research and learning is about physical practices and the effect on the physical body, because I am a yoga teacher. So a lot of people are coming to yoga mostly focused on that. But there's a lot of research that bleeds over, crosses over from, I mean, our brain is a part of our body. So we really can't separate cognitive and, you know, things that are affecting our brain from what's affecting our body. And then yoga is very much also about the whole person. So our emotions, and even you could say our spiritual health, are going to be reflected ultimately in the teachings of yoga. So again, we want to be mindful when exploring different styles of getting in this trap where we're almost addicted to a certain class and the way that that class is and the poses that are in that class and only doing that class. Sometimes I'm actually a little bit concerned about some of my Yin students in the same way. You'll notice that in the Yin class, this class that we do on Fridays, I change the sequence every week. But there's only so many sequences that I can come up with. I mean, at the end of the day, there's, I think, only like maybe 30 Yin postures. There's a limit, you know, to how many combinations you can create. And some combinations just don't make sense or aren't safe. So that limits you even more. But hopefully it's enough so that by the time we come back around, you know, there isn't necessarily a sense of familiarity. We're moving the joints in different ways, in different orders from week to week. But sometimes my Yin students, I see this in the studios quite a bit, some people just come to the Yin class and they never try the more vigorous styles or other styles of yoga. And again, this is, even though it's not the same sequence every week, some of the same things that I'm talking about apply here. All right, let's go ahead and unwind from that. So I wish it were the case that what we enjoyed doing, what was easy for us, what felt good for us, was automatically the things that we needed to stay healthy and happy throughout our lives. But the longer I do this work and the more scientific research that I read, again, this is science-based. It's in the yoga tradition. They knew this, if not explicitly, they knew it implicitly. They just sort of knew that this was necessary for health and happiness. But now with scientific research, there's no question. There's absolutely no question about it. So I wish it were the case that we could all just sit around, watch television, take our SUVs to the store, never carry anything heavy, never do anything difficult, and stay really vital throughout our lives. But we've gotten to the point where we have so much convenience that even now children are beginning to experience diseases that used to be reserved for adults. So I'll give you a few examples. Diabetes is one that's going through the roof. And again, with children, this used to be a disease that adults got later in life. Cancer is another one. My girlfriend, who has done rotations on the cancer ward, was saying they didn't ever used to see cancer patients in their 20s and 30s in the prime of their life dying of stage 4 advanced cancer. And now it's a pretty regular thing. And then depression. This is a big thing that's happening for many young people, and it's on the rise. And this, again, used to be something you didn't see a lot in younger people and children. You know, teenagers might get moody or whatever, you know, they have a lot of hormones and things like that, but not severe depression. But this is, again, something that is more and more happening in our culture. And this is where we want to pause and ask questions. Why is this, if we're so smart, and if we have everything figured out about health and happiness, and our science is so great, then why is this happening? Why is this happening? And unfortunately, most of us are so busy going to work and making our money and taking care of our families that we don't have time to ask that. And so partly I feel that's my job, is to ask that question and to ask you to ask that question. And the reason is because if we can really understand what's going on, we can greatly improve our health and happiness. But it requires us to not just go downstream with what our culture is giving us. We have to start to fight against the current, because the current is taking us toward cancer, diabetes, depression. That's what I want you to understand. That's kind of the main current, is taking us in that direction. That's why those things are on the rise. So if that's what we want, then great. Don't do anything differently. Get Ben & Jerry's, sit in front of the tube, watch TV, take your car everywhere. Don't ever go outside and walk. Don't exercise. Don't do different things. All right, let's go ahead and unwind from this. Come onto your back, just relax for a few moments. So as I was saying, I really do wish that I could just teach people stuff that they liked, and that was enough to really lead them to happiness and health. But that's just not what my teaching, what my learning has taught me. I've learned that we very often have to go against the current, go against our, I'm not going to say instincts, but our proclivities, what we'd like to do in order to stay healthy and strong. These are things that in a natural environment we would just have been forced to do. But in this unnatural environment that we've created, we have to educate ourselves enough to know the benefits of, say, going into a class that we really don't particularly like. Now, over time, when we begin to feel better, we might feel very differently about that. Once we've sort of gotten over that initial shock of doing this class and we begin doing it regularly, our body begins to acclimate, we might be like, wow, my body feels better than it's ever felt before, right? At that point, we're sold. But that might take us going through a prolonged period of a lot of discomfort, really feeling for a while, oh, this is so hard, this is so difficult, I can't do this. All right, let's bring our legs in. And then again, we'll hinge up. The hinge helps us to stabilize hips and spine, as well as bring us up to a seat. Let's move into tabletop. We'll do a little bit of marauding bear once again, sort of moving everything around. And then from there, a little of walking your dog a bit. And then from there, let's move into sleeping swan. We bring our right knee toward our right wrist. The hips are down and back. And then you can stay up on your hands if you like. You want to feel the stretch here. You want to feel the knee and the ankle are happy with what you're doing. But many people prefer to be on their forearms like this. You are more than welcome to put a block underneath the hip to support it, but it's not necessary. This is okay as long as you still feel the stretch here and your knee is still happy. You could also rock to the left side. Your right foot could be pulled closer to the front edge of your mat for more rotation. But if you don't have that rotation, and many people don't, that much rotation, then it actually could injure your knee or ankle. So you need to be very mindful about what you feel in those joints. Feel free to also change the position or angle of your right knee. So my knee is pointed out, at an angle like that. I could point it out to the side like that. That's called abduction. So I could abduct my femur like at a 45-degree angle. That will change what I feel here. And for some people, that'll mean the difference between feeling a stretch versus not feeling a stretch, or having it feel safe versus not. So again, in a class like today, I'm really encouraging you to consider these different ideas when you're choosing how you're going to exercise, what you're going to do, how often you're going to do it. Again, you don't have to limit yourself to yoga. In fact, if you understand what I was saying about doing something new every month, you might actually once a month choose to go try something new kind of exercise. Now, I do got to say, I would be cautious and careful. Make sure you choose somebody who really knows what they're doing, because, yeah, if you go do some class, kickboxing class, you go with a friend to their intermediate kickboxing class or advanced kickboxing class, and you've never done it before, you could easily hurt yourself moving your body in a new way, aggressively. So you want to take your time. You want to start, with beginner things. Now, the one thing that's nice about yoga is there are many different styles of yoga. And again, even the way I try and sequence my classes is, again, every week we're doing something different, and we kind of are on a rotation. Let's switch sides. So with the yin classes, I'd say we probably repeat I have certain sequences I take in and out depending on what's going on in the studios. Certain sequences of mine are more challenging to people than others. And if I'm teaching at a new studio, which I am right now, I don't want to shock students too much. It's never my objective to shock people just for the sake of shocking them. As I mentioned earlier, shocking our system, challenging our brain, is really, really good for our health. So it's not shock for shock's sake. It's sort of shocking the system to keep it performing optimally. And I have, again, no idea why our bodies and brains are wired this way. I certainly didn't create the system. I'm just observing it and trying to play within the parameters that we've been given. So we can do this with exercise. We can do this with brain teasers, right? We can find new things to do, new things to learn, try new things. And then another way that you can do this is another way I've found recently is cold showers. So I think maybe you've heard me mention this before. This is something that David Sinclair mentioned when he was talking about, reversing the aging process. This is something that shocks your system. You get in the shower, you might start with it hot, but then at some point you just shut off all the hot water and you're there in the cold shower. Some people even take ice baths. Some people go cut holes in the ice and dip their body in freezing cold water in wintertime. So these are all ways we can shock our system. They're unpleasant. I hate cold showers. Or at least I did. And over the summer, I gradually trained my body to be able to take cold showers. It's still a shock every time I do it. And I do it every time I take a shower. I start with a hot shower. I sort of clean myself up. And then toward the end, I turn off all the hot water and I'm in there for a minute or two with just the cold water. And it is very invigorating. And there's something about it that is appealing, but it's still shocking. And I, again, had to train myself I had to get over the initial shock and unpleasantness of that shock in order to experience the pleasant aspects of it. Okay, let's go ahead and come on out of that one. We'll again make our way onto our back for a moment. Just relax. So the way my brain tends to work is I tend to look for themes. I look for things that show up in different places. And this idea of challenging our system, shocking our system, of not doing the easy thing is something that keeps coming up over and over and over and over again when we're talking about health, wellness, happiness. And so that's why I try and educate my students like you about it. Because without that knowledge, you will be guided solely by your likes and your dislikes. Whether something is pleasant or easy, or if it's pleasant and easy, you'll do it. If it's unpleasant, if it's difficult, you won't. But if you understand what I'm teaching you, you want to start to choose things that are difficult and unpleasant more and more if you want to, again, stay really vital, alive, and healthy. And that is something that's hard to do without the education. Again, our ancestors didn't have to choose. They were forced. They were forced to do hard labor in order to survive. They were forced to exercise. We're not going to get forced anymore. We can just keep going down, again, downstream with our culture, which is use, technology to make your life easier and easier and easier. You don't have to do any hard work. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You never have to be in a temperature that you don't want to be in. And this is part of the reason why the cold showers work. When was the last time you were freezing cold? And I mean really freezing cold. Not in a restaurant where it was a little bit, colder than you would like. You were like shivering cold. When was the last time that happened? And so again, we think, well, that's bad. I don't want that. But our ancestors couldn't avoid it. And there is something in our system that benefits from being exposed to the elements. All right, let's bring our legs in, give them a little squeeze. And we're going to hinge up to seated. Let's take our right foot back alongside our right hip like so. The toes can point back or out to the side. My knee can point forward or out to the side. I can sit on the ground or on a block or a blanket. I want to be sure the knee and the ankle are free of pain. They are safe, okay? If you feel a stretch of the front of your thigh, you're going to stay here. If you don't, you can begin lowering back to your hands, elbows, maybe the crown of your head, or all the way back onto your back. If your right knee comes off the ground, that's fine as long as that feels safe in your body, okay? So, if you're understanding what I'm trying to share with you today, you understand a large part of why I teach the way that I do. Because some people like doing Yin Yoga where there's just, peaceful music playing and the teacher doesn't say anything and the teacher talks like this the whole time. Go ahead and relax. Come into the pose. Take a deep breath in and exhale and just relax. And that's, it's pleasant. It's nice. It's relaxing. But again, if I taught like that, and I said, go ahead and put yourself in this pose and you're going to feel an excruciating pain at the front of your hip and that's okay, just relax, you're probably not going to do it. The people that are going to be drawn to that sort of approach, they are not going to be willing to do things that actually would help benefit them. And again, so I use the time in the yin postures to try and educate, to try and motivate so that you will be willing to do the next thing, whatever it is, to go on a hike and go further than you normally go, right? Some of you have heard me talk about walking 3 miles every day. It really goes in steps. The first thing to do is to get a 30-minute walk in every day if you're not doing that already. 30 minutes. No matter how hot it is outside or how cold it is, you go out there and you walk for 30 minutes. I don't necessarily think you need to walk in the rain, so take a day off, it's raining. But other than that, doesn't matter. Heat wave, get out there. Your body is designed to be able to handle it. That's where you want to start, 30 minutes. Then once you got that down, try and get in 3 miles. That'll take about twice as long. A healthy person can usually walk about 1 mile in an hour, maybe just short of that, or you go a little longer than an hour to get in 3 miles. But once you've got that down, then on the weekend, get the family together, go find a trail that's 4, 5, 6, 7 more miles and start hiking those trails. Let's switch sides. Walking together as a group is something human beings have been doing since human beings have been on this planet. And if you're, again, overwhelmed, which many of us are, how do I keep myself healthy and happy? How do I keep my kids exercising and getting outdoors and doing things that are good for them? How do I spend time with my children, quality time with my children, find out what's going on in their lives, right? Because at a certain point, we're all running around in different directions. Our kids are going to soccer practice, we're going to work, our spouse is going to do jazzercise or yoga, we're not into that, we want to lift weights at the gym. Everyone's off in different directions. And so how do we come together and do something that is going to tick several boxes? And again, Katie Bowman, who's a biomechanist, I don't know what you call people who study biomechanics, but basically she studies and teaches biomechanics. And she talks about stacking. So what she does with her family is they go on long walks together. So they are spending quality time together. They are exercising. Walking is one of the best things you can do for your health, not just your physical health, but your mental and emotional health. And again, not walking on pavement, walking on a trail, on the earth, on uneven ground is so much better for you. And then if you can bring in minimal shoes, and if you're wondering what I mean by minimal shoes, let me know. I'll send you some links to different companies that make the type of shoe I'm talking about. It's a very specific kind of shoe. That's even better for you. And then she goes a step further and she actually does what's called foraging, which is you're actually looking for edible plants and foods in the environment around you. And so she'll look, it's a great way to instantly get organic food as long as you're walking somewhere where they're not spraying and doing all that kind of stuff. You basically are getting a natural wild plant, organic plant like our ancestors used to eat. So she'll give her children tasks. She'll say, go find this kind of berry or go find this kind of plant and bring me as much of that as you can. And they're actually getting their dinner together, their meal together as they do that. Let's unwind. Come back onto our back. Relax. So what's interesting about Katie Bowman is she's a lot like me. She's a bookworm. She would, when she was younger, her mom used to say, Katie, go outside. What are you doing inside? Get out of your room. And she'd be there with her face in a book. She didn't want to go outside and play. She wanted to read another book. I was like that when I was young. I wanted to be playing music or video games indoors or drawing. I used to like to pencil draw a lot. Everything I wanted to do was indoors, listening to music. I didn't want to go outside. It was hot outside. I was in sweat. I didn't like sports. But Katie, like me, through her studies of biomechanics, for me, through my studies of yoga and health, we both have learned the value of getting outside and moving. And so again, it's not my natural inclination. I would rather be indoors doing something indoors. But because I've learned, I've been educated about the value, that motivates me to get outside. And so that's why I share that with you. I'm hoping to inspire you and to educate you on the value of getting out, moving your body, and doing things that, again, are challenging or difficult, things that you normally might shy away from. All right, so you can bring your legs in, give them a little squeeze. I recommend taking a few minutes to relax. My recommendation is 6 minutes. Just set a timer and spend the next 6 minutes relaxing. If there are any questions, again, please reach out. I'm happy to talk with you further or answer a question about something, but hopefully you got something from today's class. All right, everyone. Thanks so much, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Namaste.